The Senate on Thursday passed the Petroleum Industry Bill (PIB) with a provision that granted the use of 30% of oil and gas profits of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited to fund oil exploration activities in frontier basins. But this was not without drama at plenary on what percentage of operating expenditure of oil companies should constitute funds embarked for host communities development in the bill. Senate President Ahmed Lawan said the passage of the historic bill marks a watershed for the Ninth Assembly, saying PIB demons have been defeated. The passage of the bill followed the consideration of the report of the Senate Joint Committee on Downstream Petroleum Sector, Petroleum Resources Upstream, and Gas on Bill for an Act to provide legal, governance, regulatory, and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities, and for related matters 2021, popularly called the Petroleum Industry Bill (PIB). The lead chairman of the Joint Committee, Senator Sabo Mohammed Nakuda, presented the report. The Senate, after due consideration, approved that host communities would henceforth enjoy 3%, which is $502.8 million of annual operating expenditure of oil firms to be contributed into the Host Community Development Trust Fund. However, Deputy Senate President Ovi Agege in his contribution pleaded with the Senate to increase the 5% proposed for the development of host communities in the bill. Nakudu said the Joint Committee's recommendation recognizes the need for the country to urgently and aggressively explore and develop the country's frontier basins to take advantage of the foreseeable threats to the funding of fossil fuel projects across the world due to speedy shift from fossil fuel to other alternative energy sources. To this end, the committee recommends funding mechanism of 30% of the NNPC Limited profit oil and profit gas, as in the production sharing, profit sharing, and rig service contracts to fund exploration of frontiers basin. On funding for host communities, the Joint Committee had earmarked 5%, but the Senate slashed it to be 3% operating expenditure of oil firms. Akudu said, this chapter highlights the effective and efficient administration of the host community trust fund, which is to be anchored by SECLO, that is the oil and gas company operating in the host communities. The various recommended provisions, when passed into law, will ensure a peaceful operating environment that will have a positive direct impact on the cost of oil and gas production, which has been the bane of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. After extensive engagement with various stakeholders and on-the-spot assessment visit to host communities across the country, the Joint Committee recommended strengthening measures and saddled the host communities with responsibilities with a view to reducing or completely eradicating interferences and tampering in the country's oil and gas production assets. Furthermore, to ensure adequate development of the host communities and reduction in the cost of production, the Joint Committee recommends 5% of the actual annual operating expenditure of the preceding financial year in the upstream petroleum operations affecting the host communities for funding of the host communities trust fund. Earlier, Omoagege said even though the 5% provision for host community development in the bill was arrived at after due consultation, he called for a slight increase to assuage and the feelings and pains of oil-bearing communities. He noted that while the Niger Delta people want a deal, a no deal is better than a bad deal. Omoagege said, today I speak not as the Deputy Senate President, but I speak as the Senator representing Delta Central Senatorial District. For us, in the Niger Delta, there are three areas that are of much interest to us. I'm sure my other colleagues will speak to it. On the whole, the major thrust, the rationale for pushing for this bill, which has eluded this country for so many years, is for us to get a new law in place that will create an enabling environment for foreign investors coming with their money to invest in the sector before, as we were told, our oil will go out of fashion. Some of us have This belief that no matter the thinking of the investment community, oil will always be relevant. Some of them have made this case that in the next 10 to 15 years there will be no use for oil. Mr. President, this may be acceptable to a lot of people in this country, but in my senatorial district and indeed in most of Niger Delta, they are prepared to let this oil remain on the ground until maybe another 40 to 50 years when there may be need for oil again. What does that mean? Mr. President, they want a deal, but they want a good deal. Sometimes, Mr. President, no deal could be a better deal than a bad deal. Mr. President, when we raise these issues, I want to thank you most especially. I want to thank the Senate leader and the leadership for the leadership role you played in arranging for our colleagues to meet and engage and come with some sort of accommodation. And Mr. President, this bill, as originally conceived, provided only 2.5% contribution by sector companies to the host community trust fund. This is not the first experiment or first attempt. Mr. President, I'll still make a case if possible that we go a little more than 5% already agreed. I understand we cannot meet the 10%, but that is the clamor at home. I need to plead that if there is a chance we can go a little more than the 5%, we'll be grateful. Co-chairman of the Joint Committee, Senator Bassi Albert Akpan, noted that the 5% provided for host communities in the bill connotes that property and equipment of oil companies will be secured by host communities or part of the trust fund will be used to remedy any damage or theft. However, it was learned that the Senate decided to reduce the 5% and marked for host communities trust fund to 3% following the closed-door briefing of lawmakers by the Minister for State, Petroleum Resources, Timipri Silva, and Group Managing Director of the NNPC, Mele Kyari. However, efforts by Omo Agege, Senators George Sikebo and James Manager to get a better deal for the development of host communities failed. During the by-clause consideration of the bill, Senator Ahmed Baba Kita Castina North proposed an amendment to the effect that if the contribution to host communities trust fund is pegged at 3%, government will ensure security of oil firms' equipment, but if it is 5%, communities will be responsible for securing production equipment in their domain. When it was put to voice vote, the 3% sailed through. Apparently peeved by the development, Sikebo called for a division of the Senate, citing Order 73 of the Senate Standing Orders. Senate President Ahmed Lawan and Senate Leader Yahya Abdullahi prevailed on Sekibo to withdraw his motion in view of the existing unity in the Senate. Sekibo withdrew his motion and pleaded that the 3% be increased by retaking the vote on the amendment earlier proposed by Keata. Lawan thanked Sekibo for his statesmanship in withdrawing his motion but declined to call for a fresh vote on Keata's motion. We have already ruled, and it is against the provision of the standing orders of this chamber to revisit a matter already ruled upon by the presiding officer, Lawan said. Senator Manager, in his remarks, described the 3% of operating expenditure of oil firms and marked for the host communities development trust fund as a bitter pill to swallow. Senator Nakudu later told Senate correspondent that the 3% provision is a lot of money. He said that the 3% translates to over $500 million annually. He said that the percentage was reduced from 5 to 3 to encourage investors. He added that the 3% was in addition to other statutory funding arrangements already accruing to Niger Delta region. Spokesman of the Senate, Senator Surajuddin Ajibola Bashiru, said the 3% amounted to $502.8 million annually.